Ice rinks are not glamorous places. They're the spiritual sisters of bowling alleys, all hard plastic and spongy flooring. When I enter, hauling a huge bag of hockey gear, it's the same smell I've inhaled 1,000 times, like air conditioning on steroids. There are other notes, like body odor and citrus-scented cleaner. But the cold dulls them, like how a chilled glass can make a bad beer palatable. I drop my bag, and immediately the woman on the next bench over starts chatting, saying, "So where do you play?" I'm not someone who walks up to strangers and starts a conversation. If I'm ever murdered, the Who Killed This White Woman podcast hosts will not say that I lit up a room. It is what it is. Social skills just did not come naturally to me. After 30 years of trial and error, however, I can be friendly enough. But it still takes a moment for me to respond to the question of what rink I play hockey at. The answer is nowhere. Not anymore. I tell the woman that I've really only skated a few times over the last 15 years. When you grow up, important parts of your identity become just things you used to do. And hockey became something I used to do because it became another place where I just wasn't good enough. Add to that the expenses of the sport and the lack of ice rinks in Southern California, it was just more practical to leave it behind. But for some reason, I'd been dragging around my old hockey gear from apartment to apartment for more than a decade. It outlived roommates, jobs, and friendships. As long as I still had my gear, I could imagine a future where I played again. So when I secured a new job after years of frantic freelancing, I realized I could finally afford to do something just because I wanted to. When I pulled out my hockey bag after years stuffed in the back of my closet, I was prepared to battle a nest of spiders or ants or whatever critters can live off human sweat and skin cells. In the end, I only had to throw out my old gloves. There was something growing on them. Despite playing on ice, hockey is one of the world's sweatiest sports. Each player is cocooned in foam and plastic. And after playing, you're not only drenched with that day's sweat, but the heat of your skin activates years of bodily fluids, soaked into shoulder pads, elbow pads, gloves, shin guards, and helmet. And growing up, most of us just shoved our wet gear back in the bag and let it fester until the next skate. Cold, wet gear is an indispensable part of the competitive youth hockey experience. At tournaments in Detroit or Hartford or Anchorage, me and a dozen other 12-year-old girls would drag our hockey bags into the locker room at 7 a.m. Since all our gear was still moist from last night's game, getting dressed was like putting on a 12-piece wet bathing suit in a walk-in refrigerator. Meanwhile, our parents lined up to buy snack bar coffee. Playing for a travel team meant plane tickets and hotels and team dues and uniforms and customized equipment bags. And these are just the bare minimum costs. There was always something that would take your game to the next level. Private coaches, power skating camps, and obscenely expensive equipment promise to get you more playing time, help you make a better team, or make the dream of a college scholarship come true. Once you buy the dream, there's always someone who will sell you a way to get there. But even as a kid, I knew I couldn't possibly ask more of my parents. Both from working-class Pittsburgh families, they moved to California and clawed their way into the middle class with long hours and longer commutes. The unspoken truth was that we really couldn't afford the burden of travel hockey. Yet there I was. I couldn't ask more of my parents, so I asked more of myself. I skated every chance I got, and I trained off the ice however I could. The summer before 10th grade, we visited family in Pennsylvania. I brought the printed off-season workout plan provided by my coach, excusing myself from a barbecue to go for a run, and doing push-ups at the airport gate. Rather than asking my parents to buy me a hockey goal for the backyard, I strung up a blue tarp I found in the garage and used duct tape to mark the dimensions of the goal. After school, passersby heard repeated bangs as I shot pucks on the back patio. I was diligent about hockey, but I was obsessive about my schoolwork. I was the insufferable girl crying because she got a B on a calculus test. I stayed up late writing essays and studied the periodic table during the drive to practice. When traveling for tournaments, I squeezed homework between flights and games and team meals. Was my academic perfectionism a fruitless quest to conjure self-worth from report cards? Yes. But I was also hoping that my perfect grades would make college coaches give me the second look that I never seemed to get. Senior year, my hockey team printed a booklet of player profiles for college scouts to peruse at tournaments. We each had a page with our name, picture, height, GPA, and SAT score. And over the course of that year, my teammates were plucked from the human catalog by the University of Connecticut, Northeastern, and the University of Minnesota. I had some calls with coaches, but I didn't get into any of those Ivy League schools that I was sure would make all that work worth it. And ultimately, I went to a school in California that didn't have a men's hockey team, let alone a women's. That fall, I left for my safety school, wondering what I'd done wrong. A few years later, when the Great Recession took my parents' middle-class dream home, I wondered if the thousands of dollars they spent on my hockey career was the reason they lost everything. Hockey became the prime example of a story that seemed to play on repeat in my life. That, sure, I was good. A good student. A good athlete. A good writer. But never good enough for it to really matter. At the 10 p.m. adult skills clinic, we spill onto the ice, and I take a few strides, knees bent, arms swinging. My body remembers the movements, and after a couple of laps, my heart is pounding. I hear a bucket of pucks being dropped on the ice, the thumps and slaps echoing into the wide, frigid air. I reach my stick out and scoop one up, guiding it from side to side. When you grow up, you stop going fast. You forget what it's like to rip through the air with momentum and power. You stop tempting gravity, prodding at physics to see what you can get away with. But being in full hockey gear again is like having a suit of armor. Even if I fall, I'll get back up. The coach running the clinic calls us all into a corner and demonstrates some simple skating patterns. I have never seen this man before in my life, but hockey coaches are like Ken dolls. Just variations of the same mold. Matching black windbreaker and pants, a baseball cap with the brim conservatively curved, and a close-cropped beard beginning to gray. They command attention with booming voices, cracking their sticks against the ice and carving the surface with powerful strides, reminding themselves of what they were once capable of. As a girl, I had many crushes on my coaches. Now, listening to this 40-something clinic coach, I find that tendency fully intact. We run through drill after drill, skating from end to end, passing and shooting and chasing down pucks. I try to make myself take it slow, but it feels just like it did growing up. And on my teams, if you took it slow in practice, you ended up skating ladder sprints. Or worse yet, riding the bench on game day. I remind myself that there's nothing to win and no one to impress as the coach splits us into teams to scrimmage for the last 20 minutes. Hockey is fundamentally about controlling chaotic circumstances. It's balancing on steel blades, cradling a bouncing puck, finding minuscule opportunities within the hurricane of sticks and bodies. This late-night scrimmage of beginners and retirees is not quite as intense. But after 40 minutes of skating and drills, and maybe pushing myself harder than necessary, I'm soaked in sweat. And even though half the other players are just trying to stay vertical, I can hear a coach a decade away saying, "Move your feet or get off the ice." As the other team carries the puck into our zone, I skate backwards and the words, "Watch the body, not the puck," spring to the front of my mind. I poke check, neutralize the threat, and pass to a guy on my team. I start to feel lightheaded. And I have the sense to drag myself to the end of the bench and take a seat. I lean over, elbow pads resting on my knees, but the contortion doesn't help my churning stomach. And now my opponent is not the other team. It's my own body. What makes the urge to vomit so disturbing is that your body, the one thing that you feel like you should be able to control, is refusing to listen to you. I close my eyes and try to convince myself that we really don't need to do this. But we do. My stomach turns inside out and the contents slingshot up through my esophagus. An orange-brown sludge erupts from my mouth. There's a moment of relief, but I'm not done. I lean forward and heave the rest of my Trader Joe's burrito onto the spongy floor, focusing on the trails of spit and bile hanging from the cage of my helmet. At this point, my pride has left the party. This is gross. I am gross. I am a woman in her 30s vomiting in a shopping mall ice rink at 11 p.m. on a Monday night. And then, the clinic coach, my crush du jour, is leaning over the boards to look at me and my puddle. I tell him I'll clean it up, but he just tells me to keep playing if I want to. And that does feel less awkward than standing there observing my swamp of shame. So I go back out on the ice, and a teenage rink employee walks a mop bucket over to the bench. It can't be the first time they've had to clean up vomit. It's just usually 6-year-olds at birthday parties. In the final minutes of the scrimmage, I feel less embarrassed than I expect to. Maybe it's the relief that comes after throwing up, or maybe I'm just too tired to feel anything else. Maybe it's because this all doesn't feel quite real. It's been so many years, but this place is exactly the same. And apparently, all my old tendencies are too. My tendency to push and push, to criticize myself before anyone else can, to believe that if I just try hard enough, I can control the chaos. When the Zamboni reawakens and we clear the ice, I'm filled with a strange lightness, and not just because of the vomiting. After carrying around 10 pounds of gear, getting undressed is like setting down a burden you forgot you'd been carrying. With the rip of some Velcro straps, you can finally feel the manufactured cold. Sometimes, when you take your shin guards off, you can even see the steam rise off your legs. This is what I missed. That sensation of emptying yourself and feeling new again. That night was almost 2 years ago now. It was close to midnight when I carried my bag up to my apartment, but I decided not to just stuff my gear back in the closet. When you grow up, a lot of who you are stays the same. But if you're lucky, you begin to figure out what you can and cannot change. So now, every week, after I drive to the rink, skate too hard, and return soaked in sweat, I lay my gear out on the patio to dry.
Put your hands together for Allison. Gauss!